Hello, everyone. Thank you all for attending another one of our Adulting 101 workshops. Today, we are so excited to have Browning. He's coming at us from the School of Education. He is also a recent winner of the Conversations on Diversity and Inclusion Awards. He recently won the Promising Newcomer Award. I wanted to give him a little round of applause for that. That was very cool. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Browning.
Thank you. Welcome everyone, hello. My name is Browning Neddeau. I am an assistant professor of elementary teacher education in the School of Education and an assistant professor of American Indian Studies in MCGS. And I'm so delighted to be here to speak with you today and to be invited to come in and talk on this topic. You see me looking toward the side. I'm trying to do multiple screens here, so I apologize if you get a profile view for a little bit here. The topic for today is using your privilege to advance community wellness. How are we doing? And I would like to see if I can move my slide here. Okay. We acknowledge and are mindful that CSU Chico stands on lands that were originally occupied by the first people of this area, the Mechoopda, and we recognize their distinctive spiritual relationship with this land and the waters that run through campus. We are humbled that our campus resides upon sacred lands that once sustained the Mechoopda people for centuries. And I'd like to note that Mechoopda people are still here, and so this is not to say that the Mechoopda people are not here any longer, but they were here, they're here now, and they'll be here in the future. I'd like to get a pulse of who is joining us today in our space here, our virtual space here during this very uncertain and challenging time that we're all experiencing with COVID-19. So I appreciate you all being here and joining for this conversation that we'll be having today. But we'll be using the breakout room feature on Blackboard, or Zoom rather, throughout this meeting today. And we're going to start with the introductions. For the introductions, we'll be breaking you into small groups. And in your group, if you can please share your first and last name and your pronouns. The examples are he, him, his, she, her, hers, or they, them, theirs. And then if you can please share with the people in your group the story of your name. So share out your first and last name and your pronouns and the story of your name. We'll be using this information as we move forward with our presentation today. Well, welcome back. Does anyone feel called? We have time for just maybe one or two share outs for people that like to share with the whole group about your name and your pronouns and the story of your name. I'll start and then maybe someone will feel called to come forward. My name is Browning Michael Neddeau. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I received my first name because my uncle is F. Browning Pipestem, and F. Browning Pipestem was a Native American lawyer who presented cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And my family thought that it was a powerful name, and maybe that's something that I could, that could be a role model to me, something to live up to in my life. And so they named me Browning, and then I became a teacher just like my parents. And that's a good job too, because that's what we all did too. And my middle name is Michael because I have an older sister who walked on at day old, and her name was Michelle, and so my parents named me Michael in honor of my sister. And Neddeau is everyone in my tribe, Citizen Palami Nation. That's a founding family name has a French last name because we all married French fur trappers from Canada. Does anyone else like to share out their name and their pronouns?
My name is Michael, and I was named after the Archangel Michael in the Bible, and my pronouns is he and him, and that's really it.
Thank you, Michael. Welcome. Anybody else feeling called to share out?
So I'll go. My name is Stephanie, and my pronouns are she, hers. And my name is something, my mom is like very moved by like the spiritual side. She had a dream. She then saw the S spelling of my name, that's sort of like phonetic in Spanish spelling in the dream. And then later she came up with the I, which is something she saw, I think, like in readings on names. And so that is why I have the name that I do. And it's really special to me because it connects me to my mom and her like very spiritual side.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. Welcome, Stephanie. Well, our stories are very important, and it also helps us position our conversation for today. We'll be looking at privilege and community wellness, but I think we have to break down the words privilege and we have to break down the words community and wellness as we're moving through this conversation. So I wanted us to take a moment here to look at the word privilege first. I think that's a very powerful word, but also a misunderstood word and a word that gets thrown around a lot, and people don't really have an understanding of what privilege is, and maybe they think they don't have any privilege, or other maybe negative things about privilege. Maybe there are positive things about privilege. There's all kinds of different ways to think about this. I'd like you to just take a moment and think about what the word privilege means to you. And I'm known for giving a lot of pauses and waiting because I think wait time is important for us all to process things. So we are going to go into a group very quickly though. This is a very small group, and you're going to be working with one other person, approximately one other person. And you'll just share out your definition of privilege. But it's going to be a very short exercise here.
I said I feel like the privilege is like something that you can have, but like other people like don't get access to, or like can't have as you. So I feel like once you get a certain opportunity, then it's good.
Thank you for sharing that, Michael. Anyone else like to share what is privilege to you?
I'll go. Hi everyone, I'm Kelsey. I think privilege is something that and I don't know, I didn't catch fully what Michael had started off with, so it might be similar. But it's something that you walk through life with, not always having to think about. And so for an example, one of my examples was every day I get in my car and I drive to work. Well, for some people, they might not have a vehicle. They might not have access to money to purchase a vehicle. Maybe they're riding the bus. Maybe they're walking. And so for me, like recognizing like, hey, I'm blessed to have a vehicle, to be able to pay for this vehicle. Like that's a privilege. So things we don't necessarily always think about sometimes.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. We're going to watch a quick clip here. Well, it's a little longer, I guess. There are 13 minutes, and then we'll move on with our discussion regarding privilege and connecting that to community wellness. But I chose this particular clip, and if you've seen it before, then welcome back to a little review here about privilege. But I think this is a great clip because it talks about privilege, but from different perspectives of different college students. And please let me know if you cannot hear the sound because there is supposed to be sound.
And learning more about somebody else's story.
Damn, this is getting me emotional. So now we're going to compare all of you in this episode, like the video, and see how much privilege you have.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race. Hey, we are.
This sounds like an inspirational video.
For a $100 bill.
I've seen this video.
Oh, I love this video. This is so good.
Before I say go, I'm gonna make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you,
Oh, this is gonna get deep.
I want you to take 2 steps forward.
I'm gonna say what I have to.
Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married.
Nope.
Wow.
Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home.
Yep.
No.
Damn, they really are cheating, sticking these leaps.
Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education.
There's a lot of them.
Oh,
Take 2 steps forward if you had access
I see where this is going.
This is like showing, I guess, privilege.
if you had access to a free tutor growing up.
People have that?
Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off.
Aw.
Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills.
Oh, man.
Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability. You don't have to pay for college.
Oh, y'all better take some big steps right there.
Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from.
Wow.
I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look.
Then yes, I'm gonna cry.
It just makes me sad how these are factors that have nothing to do with what any of them have done, and it's just the situation and the cards they've been dealt.
Has nothing to do with anything any of you have done.
Puts things into perspective.
We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No.
It's such a good metaphor. I love this video.
To not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start.
Some of them never even moved.
But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race.
Wow, life metaphor, man.
Whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learning more about somebody else's story.
Damn, this is getting me emotional.
It's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life.
This is amazing.
On your mark.
Oh gosh, yeah, I'd lose for sure, even if I was in the front.
Go!
They're gonna win, not because they deserve to. This is like giving me chills.
If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
That was so cool. I love that.
No one's saying like you're bad or anything. It is like acknowledging that you do have that head start in life for the race he's talking about.
With like younger people, it's important to kind of demonstrate or do these sort of like exercises and activities so they can kind of understand, because sometimes words just don't stick.
To see something like this being done by a white male, somebody who has so much privilege, it's so refreshing because he's, you know, recognizing the privilege that he has, and he's showing, you know, other people who have privilege, like, you need to recognize this too.
Hopefully when people watch this, honestly, they'll be more aware of the privileges they do have. Like honestly, like I have privileges too. Like I think everybody has a privilege they don't recognize. It puts you in a spot where you realize the ones you have and you realize the ones you didn't have.
So now we're going to compare all of you in this episode, like the video, and see how much privilege you have.
Okay.
So keep track on the whiteboard, and for all the statements from the video, we're going to see how many steps ahead you'd end up with.
Okay.
Okay.
I already know that most of these are going to be yeses.
Yeah.
If both your parents are still married, that's one step.
25 years.
If you grew up with a father figure in the home, that's another step.
Okay.
Papa Mark.
If you had access to a private education, that's another step.
I did not.
Like private school? Oh, yeah, I guess.
If you had access to a free tutor.
Yeah.
If you never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off, that's another step. If you've never had to help your mom or dad with the bills, that's another step.
We do, but that's not, they don't make us.
If it wasn't because of your athletic ability that you don't have to pay for college, that's another step.
Half point because my parents paid for half my college and then I'm paying for half.
If you've never wondered where your next meal is going to come from, that's another step.
Never. That scares me.
So what was your score?
I got all of them. 8. We would have been up front. 7.5 points. I grew up in a home where I didn't have to worry about a lot of things that a lot of people do.
5. I take ownership of it. Like, I try and use the resources I have to help others or like to educate others.
4. There are areas that I didn't really think about before where I am privileged.
Mine's 5, so I think I'm grateful for this right here. You know, this is a lot of privileges most people don't have. I actually think about how many different backgrounds we have on the show and how everyone comes from a different household in a story we don't know about, so that's kind of like makes me want to think like just treat everyone in a good way because you don't know about the shit they're going through.
It's cool to see that our cast comes from so many different little bits and pieces of the world. You realize that there's a story behind every person.
I'm taking none. I always try to think there's people who have less than I do. Like, if I have no tallies, it's fine. Fine for me. I could live with that.
This is a video highlighting the idea of privilege. For you personally, how has privilege or lack of privilege impacted your life?
I mean, I'm very fortunate to have grown up with a family where I don't have to worry about food or like money.
It's completely set the course for my life. Like, I've gone to a private school my whole life, so then I was able to go to a private college, and then from here I'll hopefully get a really good job. And if I didn't have that foundation, I wouldn't have been able to take the steps that I have now.
Because I'm a Mexican-American male, I've been given privileges that females haven't been given. But also considered a minority, there are some things where I don't have the upper hand in.
In a lot of ways, I am not considered privileged, and then in other ways I am considered privileged. I always say to some of my white friends, I'm like, when it comes to things, you know, such as school or even the career that I'm pursuing, I have to work twice as hard as you just because of the color of my skin. I have to get people to see that I'm, you know, serious about what I'm doing.
Growing up, like, I didn't, like, my family, like, we came from the bottom up. Like, my dad, like, started, like, been 30 years with the company and, like, worked his way up. So I know what it's like to not have money and be frugal. I've seen my dad, like, I've seen, like, the kind of person he was, like, where we were at before in our old house and then moved into our new community now.
I grew up in a family who was always on welfare, always getting these government benefits. My mom would try to get jobs, but she wouldn't get them. And honestly, like, it sucks to say, but I grew up in a family who were all gang members. And honestly, I hate when people say, oh, your mom's honestly not trying. No, every opportunity she got, she tried to get a job, but nobody would hire her. Because she grew up like in an environment too that was like that. And my mom might have not had the best life, but she was trying her hardest.
So the topic of privilege tends to be, you know, rather controversial. For people that argue that privilege exists, usually they will argue that whether or not you know it, an element of one's life gives them an advantage over other people. Do you think that privilege exists in people's lives, whether they realize it or not?
Definitely. And I think because we live in California, it's not as visible. It's so multicultural out here that people have no problem seeing you or walking down the street with you or sharing a meal with you.
Privilege does exist because it's like some people never have to work for anything. They can just go to school and they don't have to worry about it, whereas other people might have to work since they're 15 to save up and go to school.
If you're African American or darker skin or whatever, you're a little more like worried about stuff. If I go to the airport or whatever, there is a different type of mindset, not fear, but like mindset I have already going in, like, hey, I'm probably am gonna get stopped or randomly checked, because it's part of the, like, how stuff works. Like, not, it shouldn't work like that, but that's how stuff works.
It's like its own bubble. You're in it, but you don't realize you're in it. I realized that I need to work hard to get, if I wanna, like, it sounds bad, but if you wanna have those privileges or something, you have to keep moving forward and keep doing it. It's like something you can't stop doing.
When you are privileged, you don't have to think about it. And I've had conversations about this with my father, who is a white male. Luckily, he's been very receptive to it. And now he sees like, okay, yeah, I am privileged in those two ways, but I've never had to think about it because it just doesn't affect my life in a negative way.
So there's some people who disagree with the idea of privilege, often arguing that perceived privileges are an excuse put out by those struggling to find success, or that it shouldn't be called a privilege to set yourself or your child up for success.
I think privilege is real, but I do agree with that people can use it as something to pity themselves.
A lot of people use it as an excuse. People who didn't have resources in general in their lifetime, they did figure out how to overcome it. It must have been stupid hard, way harder than someone who had the privilege, but they still got it done.
I don't think you can say there's no such thing as privilege when you've enjoyed it your entire life, you know? Because and yeah, people like to use that excuse of people not working hard enough, but the thing is that most people with the privilege aren't working hard enough.
Even if you are a white male and you are, privileged in that sense, you could still be, you could still have a lack of privileges in other ways. If we really think about it, most people are at a disadvantage in one way or another.
It's a real thing and it does affect people, and I understand that argument, but I think a lot of times that argument comes from people who don't like to acknowledge that they've had the upper hand. The things that you have set up for you by your parents or by one parent, like that definitely sets you on a certain track.
People are like, oh, I worked hard for this, but what did you have in your life that helped you do that? Yeah. Because there's a lot of people that work super hard but still don't have the opportunity that we have.
Going back to the video we showed you, the video is made by Link Year, a gap year educational program focusing on Christianity. Does it change your view of the video knowing that it was put out by a religious group?
Honestly, no.
No, it doesn't, because they aren't really talking about anything religious. They're talking about real societal problems.
Sometimes religion is viewed in such a negative way, especially when this video has nothing to do with religion, especially. They're just promoting good morals.
Religion itself kind of gives me like an eerie feeling. Knowing that it came from like the church and produced it, I don't think so, because it's still a good message.
If anything, it's even more awesome because it just talks about, this unity and kind of realizing that some people have it better than others. And it totally doesn't change my perspective on it, though. I think it's still a fantastic video and a great lesson.
Finally, regardless of how people feel on this issue, do you think it is important that we think about and discuss privilege?
Oh, definitely, because if we don't talk about this, it just grows ignorance.
Use your resources wisely. I mean, that's the main thing you can do is be courteous and generous with what you're given that other people can't.
It's just so frustrating when you can't get into people's heads about that stuff. And you can't change their mind. You can't change their mind about, listen, things need to change.
That's the one way that we're going to, one, be able to find common ground. And that's also how we're going to move forward and make change. We need to discuss this. We need to have, some sort of discourse.
If you've reached a certain level, I'm not asking you to, totally demean yourself and say, hey, I don't have any skill, I just got here. I just want it to be acknowledged. I would like for it to be acknowledged hey, I'm here because of this. Even though we can't do anything about it, I think it's still important to talk about what it is and for others to not demean minorities or whomever else because they don't enjoy the same things that they do.
So privilege. What is privilege? We just had, before this video, we had a little moment to think about on our own the word privilege. What is it? We saw this video clip of what is privilege. Can anybody shout out or share out some things that might be considered privilege? I'll give an example, like sexual orientation. Can anyone think of another one?
Parents paying for college, having a college fund as you were being raised.
Thank you.
High-speed internet.
High-speed internet, yeah.
Having a job right now?
Yes.
Having insurance.
Insurance. Mm-hmm.
I also think even having a device that has a camera on it, and so I can show my self view, right? Like y'all can see me. When we talked in our small group about what privileges are, we talked about power and access to resources. And so a lot of times when it comes to relationships, right, like it's relational power, right? Like it's power over, right? And I was going somewhere with that. And I think a lot of people in the video identified like the privileges that they have. I thought it was really interesting how the people who verbalized, some of the people who verbalized or performed allyship and support of the video talked verbally about how supportive they were about, this is such a good video, it's great to show, but then we're unwilling to deny that meritocracy narrative that like people who are in the position that they're in use privilege of others as an excuse. I thought that was really interesting. And I'm going to turn my mute off.
Thank you for sharing that out. We may see conversations around race, ethnicity, political identity, and age. We have a piece of legislation, out there about non-discrimination against 40 or over for age discrimination in the workplace. That must be there for a reason. And then we have gender, SES, socioeconomic status, which was mentioned, and all kinds of different things. But I think it's important to call out these things that could be seen as privilege while we're looking at the next parts, because we have to identify privilege first and call it what it is before we can start moving forward with this important work. I hope you can see my slides right here. Thank you. So before we dive into understanding wellness, we need to also define community. Who is in your community? In the breakout rooms, just quickly, I'd like you to think about these topics that could take for a long, long time. Is who is counted in your community, and who might be, if any, counted out of your community, and why? So thinking about this for just a moment before we move into the groups. So now we're bringing our ideas of our positionality, thinking about our privileges that we come with to this space today, but thinking about who is counted in your community and who might be, if any, counted out of your community, and why is that? About privilege now, we've talked about community plus this idea of wellness, and I think that the concept of who is counted in and who is counted out of your community is important, not to say that we're doing something negative or positive for one community, but just acknowledging that there might be these, how we're thinking, acknowledging where we are, positionality in the community, and what do we plan to do moving forward with this information. So I'm going to, I don't want us to share out necessarily this part, but just as a thinking point, it sounds like there were great conversations going on in the groups that I popped in to, so I appreciate that. This is a Yuri Brockenbrenner ecological systems approach. So when you're thinking about your community and community wellness and your positionality with privilege and where this might bring you and how you might connect health and wellness with your communities. Who are you keeping inside or outside of your community? Think about this Yuri Brockenbrenner piece perhaps, and you can see the individual part. It moves out to these bigger and bigger parts. So it's your closer units are really that inside part, that micro system. And I heard people talk about religion and sharing these religious spaces and family members and peers. That's your microsystem. How are you bridging out and expanding your privilege to help other people and different systems that you might be involved with? If we're looking at the social services and the exosystem and the mesosystem, moving out that direction, we're looking at the mesosystem is like, if you think of parent-teacher conferences, or how those microsystems and are kind of like the connecting pieces between those two different systems. Like, how are your peers connecting with other systems outside those cross sections or intersections? That's where the mesosystem plays in there. But thinking about, are you using your privilege to help health and community wellness just in your microsystem? Or are you taking your privilege and helping other people in different areas of the community? What does that look like? And there isn't one right or wrong answer. This is just to create greater awareness of your privilege and how you're using it to help other people. In my perspective, I see going to college as a privilege. Access and equity to college is something that not everybody has. So how are we using our privilege, in my perspective at least, of going to college to help other people in our communities across these different exosystems, or these different systems, these ecological systems? If we're just keeping it in our own little home, wherever that might be, an apartment, a trailer, a house, rental, own, whatever it might be, or sharing a room, how are you taking your privilege that you still have in that space and helping other people and helping create this community wellness, spreading community wellness? Do all communities engage in the same way? There's some things to think about. Does your culture, what role does your culture, if any, does your culture play in your ecosystem? Is there some particular thing that your culture does that, whatever culture is defined for you, does that kind of direct how you work with health and wellness? Maybe there's a particular thing that in your culture that your culture does or follows, principles, ideals. Does that impact how you help or reach and use your privilege in other systems? These are just some ideas to think about. For instance, I can think in my own communities, when we're looking at our individual and this microsystem moving out to the mesosystem, we have blood relatives who are uncles and aunts. And then we have these, it's confusing to some people because they say, oh, my uncle or my auntie, and they're not my relative by blood, but they're someone that's really close to my family. Does anyone else have something similar like that? And that can be a little bit confusing, but here you're actually moving between these different, and that's just an example of you using your privilege to kind of move between these, but it's also could be a part of your culture to use these aunties and uncles. So just trying to play with those ideas a little bit there for you. I see that we're running short on time, but I wanted to make sure that we discuss this and make you a little bit aware of that. The next slide I have here is about wellness. Based on the community that you belong, or the culture that you identify, or any identities that you have, your definition of wellness may differ. And it's important to think about wellness and what that means for your community. In my community, we look at how are we helping generations before us now and in the future. We look at 7 generations before and 7 generations after our time. We look at the wellness of our elders. How are we helping our elders as they've helped us throughout our time? So maybe not all communities do that. So this slide is just about what is wellness. And I had a video clip here, which I'm going to, with just a couple minutes, so I think we have time to see this. And it's just to give you some idea, trying to wrap around our minds around this idea of privilege and community wellness. This is actually about public health, but I thought that this was related to this particular topic of what is wellness.
When you're sick, you go to the doctor and the doctor treats your disease. They've been trained to do that pretty well. But what do you do when you're healthy? Well, you probably just go about your day. You've got a busy life. We all do. And you can't afford to be sick. So what if I told you there are people out there whose job it is to make sure you stay healthy? And what if I told you these are people you've probably never met? Well, these folks are in a field called public health, and their mission is to promote health and prevent disease. Doctors, on the other hand, are on a mission to treat disease. So let's say this person is diagnosed with diabetes. Now it's the doctor's job to treat her patient. She'll prescribe medications and insulin to help him meet his target blood sugar levels. Unfortunately, he'll have to keep going back for prescriptions for the rest of his life because there is no cure. To make matters worse, he'll have to deal with issues like long-term health complications, health insurance concerns, and even social discrimination. And don't forget his medical bill, almost $14,000 a year. His priorities in life are now secondary to his disease. Sure, modern medicine has come a long way, but is this the best way to address disease? Well, let's take a step back and focus on preventing disease. According to public health researchers, simple things like a healthy diet and regular exercise can help prevent the onset of diabetes. So public health folks put their health promotion and disease prevention mission to work. They lower the prices of healthier foods and beverages in school cafeterias to promote a healthy diet. And they build community sidewalks, trails, and bike lanes to promote exercise. And at a fraction of the cost of disease treatment, public health makes it really easy for people able to stay healthy in the first place. No diabetes means no long-term health complications, no health insurance concerns, and no social discrimination. Just health promotion and disease prevention. And the crazy thing is, it works really well. Because people you've never met, people you've never even talked to, devote their time to make sure you stay healthy.
I thought that kind of brought together our idea of using your privilege in health and wellness and community wellness. So we've identified our privileges. We've done this so quickly though, so I hope that you have time to think about this after our time today. We've defined our communities, just had greater awareness of our communities, maybe what we're in and which ones we're out of, and how maybe we can make some bridges there. We've looked at briefly what is wellness. So how are we doing? Are you using your privilege in social networks like Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, all those other grams I don't know about? Are you using your privilege to help support community wellness and all these different things where we are privileged to have access to these things? Well, you can start with your friends and building support. Friendship is a great entry point and discussion for community wellness. You can build ways with your friends to make sure that you're all being healthy. Encourage your friends to invite their friends to join your wellness network. I started an exercise accountability group on Facebook because during the quarantine time, I realized that I needed some support from my community. And I noticed that they invited some of their friends too. And every day, at least several of us post how we were healthy that day. What did we do? It could be anything. It could be like, we took a walk. Oh, thank goodness. You put a mask on when you were in a space that you knew that you might be able to go, but you need to wear a mask to be healthy and safe. Or the day I posted, I did jumping jacks in the morning and I did a plank, and I felt like that was amazing because I had a lot of sitting that day for grading papers, and I felt like I did jumping jacks, and I might have complained about them a little bit, Brooke, but I did jumping jacks and other things. Are you calling your elders to check in and listen? You know, sometimes they call us too, but it's okay that phones work both ways. So we should make sure that we're calling our elders to check in and listen to them. And there are groups out there that are looking for people that would mind volunteering some time to check on elders, because that can be very lonely time if they're in a assisted living and no one's checking in on them. If maybe you can volunteer to help check in on them. This comes back to these ecological systems approach by Yuri Brockenbrenner. Become a bridge builder and seek out other communities that share your common goal. Now that we've identified your community that you see yourself in, how can you find other communities that also share these same goals and be this bridge builder that we so much need in our communities now in this present time? Be active, not passive. Speak up. Your ancestors, regardless of your background, worked hard for you to be here. And we deserve and honor our ancestors by working hard for them like they worked hard for us. We stand on the shoulders of people that came before us. And at Chico State, we have so many opportunities now and in the future to work with community wellness, health and wellness, and to identify our privilege. This is Brooke right here. I guess they caught her right in the middle of saying something phenomenal. The CSU Chico's Associated Students is doing amazing things for community wellness. In addition to these videos that you may see of Brooke doing some community wellness, like how you can find foods and how you can store them so you can preserve and keep them for longer and make have healthy eating choices. We also have the Hungry Wildcat Food Pantry. We also have CalFresh. These are all ways that we're building community and we're working with community wellness just at CSU Chico. I'd like to thank you all for your time to coming in here today, and I'd like to wrap up by passing back the microphone over the virtual microphone to Kelsey, but I hope that this presentation gave a little bit of food for thought of how we can use our privilege to help develop this idea of community wellness. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Browning. And thank you everyone for attending today's Adulting 101. We do have 2 more for the semester, one next Thursday and then the following. This one coming up on the 30th will be on self-care and stress management. So keep your eyes out for that. We'll also be sending out a survey for this afternoon's adulting. So please take that when you have a chance. And again, thank you all so much for coming.